There it is. Trippy fade out on the theme music for Talk Like No One's Listening podcast. The podcast. I don't have a particular song to review today or project. So whenever that happens and you hear that music, that's actually the supposed to be just the standard theme song opening music for the podcast, which I only use that when I have nothing else. But that's something I made. If you're interested, just a little beat. That was like the first beat I ever made in Ableton when I was trying to figure it out and just start learning how to use it. And it was kind of cool to do something like that, to where you just don't really know what you're doing and you're just experimenting and you don't really expect anything to happen particularly. You're just going for it. You just start fresh again. You just wipe away all the years and years of experience and knowledge and kind of programming, in a way, of just things you've been doing, and you've been used to doing things a certain way. So when you hop over and you try to learn some new software, particularly like a whole nother DAW, digital audio workstation, that's a big challenge to just say, okay, I'm gonna just I've been working in one platform this whole time for many years. Now I'm just gonna just completely just go somewhere else, and I'm gonna start all over again and figure out how to use it, figure out what's going on. And coming from an engineer background where Pro Tools is the standard, and changing over to something like Ableton, those are the two DAWs that are about as far apart as can be. There's just the biggest difference as far as how they operate, how they're laid out, how they're designed, what they're meant to do, this and that. So it was a nice little 180, mental 180 to do that. And I suggest that if you've been using just one platform, either it's Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton or Cubase, Studio One, FL Studio, Reason, they're all pretty different. They all have a certain thing that they do well and certain things that they don't do well. So I think it's good to be comfortable with at least 2 or 3 different platforms. And you don't have to use them all the time, but I feel like just knowing them enough just to know what they're about and what they're good for, that comes in handy. Especially when they're all tools basically at the end of the day. So it's like, why not have more tools available to you? Because I find myself a lot of times while I'm working in Pro Tools that there's a certain something that I need to do while I'm mixing, or I'm producing, or just engineering for someone else, and I'm editing, and there's something I need to do. Specifically, in Pro Tools, if I need to do something where I need to take an audio file and I need to change the pitch, or I need to change the speed of it, Pro Tools, just by using the stock plugins that come with it to do that, is not good. Even they have their thing called a feature called Elastic Audio, which is meant to do that. But it's really inferior to what Ableton and Logic, and I'm sure probably other platforms have. From what I've heard, my Pro Tools stock version of like doing pitch, changing pitch and tempo of audio files is the lowest quality I've heard. So only time it works out is when you have third-party software. So it's nothing to do with Pro Tools at that point. But even when you got to do that, it's something where you have to do it. Usually you got to print it. You got to do it where you have to commit an audio file to change it to that new tempo or new pitch, with whatever you're going for. But when you do it I say Ableton is my favorite. It's the easiest as far as just how quickly you can get to that feature, that control to adjust that for an audio file, and then also the quality you get, and you're not having to commit to it, so you could just change it at any point again and again. You're not, just having to create and print just new audio files over and over again. Logic is pretty good for changing tempo of audio files. Their flex time feature that they have is pretty good. And recently they can now have a very quick and easy to use feature for changing the pitch of an audio file, and it's not a plug-in, it's just part of the thing. It's on the track. uh, when you just select an audio file, and then to the left side in the inspector, and then it'll just have that info available to you, that's one of the things I like the most about Logic, is that when you click on a audio file, and you open up the inspector, which opens up the far left column and has all the information, you have so many things that are just right there. So many options for controlling the audio file, like the pitch. You can just do it right there. You can add fades just right there by just typing in a number, dragging and sliding. You can delay the audio file. You can either have it play earlier or later, delayed back, and you could set the increment. That's very easy, especially when you're just trying to line up something like some drums, or you have just an instrument track that's just a little bit too right on beat and needs to lay back a little bit more. It's easy to just take something like that, guitar track, bass track, or even a vocal, and just set the delay so it just offsets a little bit, or a lot if you need. That's pretty easy. And then yeah, it's just nice that it's just there. It's just like how you have volume and you have mute and solo. It's just like a built-in thing to each track. That's really convenient. And same thing for Ableton. It's not necessarily on the track. That's the difference of the layout, but it's a similarly, oh, not similarly. It's different, but it's pretty quick and easy to access, just like how it is in Logic. So when it comes to having to do that kind of stuff, way better. But Pro Tools, for everything else, almost everything else that's engineering related, if I have to record tracks, record audio, I need to do edits, I need to copy and paste a bunch of stuff, I need to be able to mix, group stuff, make buses, and make very precise adjustments as far as changing values of volume, changing values of within plugins of like an EQ compressor, of how much you want to, boost or cut a frequency, how much you want to adjust on a compressor, like all these things. It's like Pro Tools is the best tool for just doing precise engineering work. But that's also what it was designed for. It was a tool designed for engineers coming out of the traditional engineering world of working on music or working on sound and music for film and TV. It just came from that world, and it was meant to be for those type of people. Where things that came later, like Logic and like Ableton, they were built at a time when it was already a thing that people would be making music on a computer and not having to use something like Pro Tools, like as if it were a tape machine, where it's just a tool for recording existing instruments, acoustic instruments or keyboards or things you plug in or vocals. But once you got to the era of it being a normal thing that people will use just the computer to make the music using soft synths and drum machines and samplers and things like that, that's when some of these other things came along. So they already were built knowing that people would be doing this type of work. So you could engineer in all these other, platforms, but it is tough sometimes for certain things. I really don't like to do it. I can do it if I have to, just because I know what I'm doing, but it's a headache. It's just similarly where, like, if I had to use Pro Tools just to produce music and write and create music, I could do it, but I definitely would not want to. It definitely would be a lot slower. Probably. I don't know. Just sometimes visually, when you look at it, at all these different platforms, and you look at what they look like, at least to me, visually, they all just make me think and feel in a different way. So the visual part is very important to me when I'm working, is that because everything that I'm looking at when I'm looking at the screen, it's all how I'm communicating with the information that's in the song. So when I look at it, that's just the info of what I see on screen has to come into my head and not have to be translated for me to understand what I'm looking at and to be able to think about what I want to do and then reverse the process and then translate it back out to what I have to do on screen to make, something happen the way I want to in my head. So all the plugins that I like to use are very, very easy on the eyes. And that's very important to me. It's like I can't look at too many different little knobs and numbers and little control things. I do use some plugins that do have a lot of features and options on them, but it's all about the visual aesthetic of how it's all laid out. So it's when you're looking at a plugin, you're not like squinting at it and you're having to figure out in your brain, what am I looking at? Okay, this knob does this, like it's the volume knob. So I need to that's my volume knob for going up and down. And then you have another knob for your frequency that you're selecting. Say this, I'm talking about an EQ. Then that's your EQ where you're going to move left or right. So I don't like having to look at it and think about I can only move in one direction at a time. My favorite EQ to use right now is the Fab Filter EQ, Pro Q, but now they just came out with the Pro Q3. But anyways, that EQ and EQs like that's my favorite because you just click and you drag to do exactly what you want. You click on the frequency and you drag it up and down and you drag left to right, diagonal, like any direction you want. And it's like so quick for me to just mentally know that I want to make some type of adjustment. And then just in one click and drag, I'm doing it and it's done. And it's precise. It's as precise as I want to get whenever I do it. Because also you can click and drag around, any direction. And you can click, I think it's option or something. When you option click and then you drag it up and down, that changes the cue. It changes the width of the bell curve. So you can make it a real sharp cut or make it wide or whatever you want. And you can do all that in one click and drag. So I can get the exact EQ setting, and visually it shows you the frequency spectrum. So visually it makes it even more precise because I can hear what I want to do, but now I can also see it on the frequency spectrum. So I can just click and drag to exactly that frequency that I want to adjust, and that's why they're the best in my opinion. But there's other ones that I use for tone and for the sound and character. That's another part. It's just there's EQs for doing broad strokes. You just want to color something, make it feel and sound a certain way. You want it to sound a little more vintage, more warm. You want it to sound a little more rock, mid-rangey. You want it to sound a little more pop, clean and bright. Those are all things you can do on one end of it, and then the next on a different stage, either before or after, then you can do something like the Pro EQ, which is an all digital EQ, to do more refined surgical type of work. Usually I'm doing it just to cut and take frequencies out for the Pro Q. And I'm usually using more analog modeled EQs and plugins like that to add the things that I want to add. So the same thing goes with just how the DAW is designed in itself, so that I can look at it and not have to think too much about what I want to do and how I have to visually do it on screen to make that happen. Well, it's going to be like that a little bit in the beginning of using any DAW just because you're not familiar with it yet. But the sooner and easier it is to get to that point, the better. And everybody is different in their mind of how they like to work. We're all individuals. So I think certain DAWs just work better for certain people, for certain people's brain and the way the mind works for them, how they like to organize, how they like to flow, how they intuitively move around and like to, build their songs and engineer and whatnot. There's so many different ways because, yeah, even just in Pro Tools, I get so many sessions from other engineers over the years. Projects, they always move around place to place, go to studio. So it's, could be always a different guy working on the song each time it's open. So what happens is you're inheriting the previous person's work and how they set up the session. And there's no one right way to set it up. That's pretty subjective. But there are some things that are definitely like objectively more efficient ways of working than others. And I see over the years, I've just seen a lot of people that just set things up in a very inefficient way. They're doing things that are very complicated. And I know I get it because I was like that early on in the beginning too, is that when you are learning and you're kind of learning stuff and you're working in the studios and you're finally getting to be an engineer where you're engineering sessions and you're the one having to set up the Pro Tools session. It's like it's your template, how you like to work, and how you think it should be and what you think are kind of clever ways of working. You do these things, it's a combination of things you see other people doing and you just learn from them and you inherit their work and their style, and then things that you figure out on your own. And I get it that it's when it's early on, you just don't have the awareness and the wisdom to know certain things that are off about the way that you work and the way that you set up your session. And some people, they confuse the idea of like if you're doing a lot and it's a very complex setup and you have lots of different buses and auxes and different groups and really long chains of plugins to process stuff. Some people, it's easy when you're new to like think that more is better, that because you're doing it more complicated and it's like more difficult of a session to manage, that it's somehow better, that you're a better engineer and you're doing more work because you're creating more work for yourself. Where over the years, whenever I've been around more experienced engineers and I watch them work and I see that they're doing less, my first I guess what is the word? My first impression of it is that, oh, they're not doing very much. Like they're not working, like they're being lazy almost. And when I actually start trying to do things the way that they do it, then I would realize, oh shit, they're not being lazy. They're just like that. They're just doing what you need to do and not anymore. And I started to realize that and think about that and think about all the things that I had been doing and all the decisions I make and the way I would set up my sessions, and start to think about each decision that I make and think about, okay, what am I doing here? What is the point of all these things? What am I trying to achieve with it? And does it really work? Does a certain plugin in a chain work? Does a certain, routing for channels, for buses and things like that, does that make sense? Is it necessary? Is it making it easier or harder to do my job. So I started, maybe after 2, 3 years, I kind of got to that point where I realized, oh shit, I'm just doing shit just because I don't even know why. I just saw other people doing it. I just stole their template. I copied it, started using it because I just assumed, oh, they do it and they're more experienced. So yeah, I should do it the way they do it. And maybe it's for them, it's good because they're the ones that set it up and maybe they know what to do with their template. But if you're just taking it on, it's not like a one size fits all kind of situation. It can be though. It can be. Not 100%, but it can be most of the time when you are very experienced and you spend a lot of time of trial and error, like I have over this past 10 years of doing this, of working with different people in different situations, different types of styles of music, different types of vocalists, from rappers to singers and instrumentalists, and even doing mixing and things like that. Figuring out that what is the type of template setup that is the most universal for every type of situation you could be in, for every type of artist, every type of music. I just worked on it. It depends on what you have available to you, what type of recording equipment you have available, what type of software plugins and things like that you have. Of course, that's going to change, and then even as the years go on, new plugins get developed and come out, and then that changes things up. So to me, it's just all about doing the most with the least, and that's just a very common rule, good rule to have just for life. It's just for any type of work that you're going to do, you would like to get the work done faster and better. And that's like the constant motivation for innovating and improving for anything that you do, is like, how do I do what I do better? How do I do that better and easier? And if you can manage to just make improvements on both sides consistently and just always be in that mode, even if it's just small, little, tiny improvements over the years, but as long as you are consistently taking steps forward and you could say, yeah, I'm better now than I was last year. I'm faster than I was last year. I'm more just efficient than I was last year. Then that's the recipe for succeeding, because what is it, to succeed in this is just to consistently get better, because it's a mountain you're climbing. So there's no shortcut. You just got to climb that mountain. And when you're at the bottom of the mountain, it looks like a big ass mountain, and you're like, fuck, how am I going to ever climb this fucking mountain? But all it is a series of steps to the top of that mountain. It might be like 100,000 steps that you got to walk or whatever, but you can't think of like having to climb 100,000 steps up a mountain. Just think of like, well, each step just comes one right after the other. So as long as I know that I am taking one step, and then eventually I take another step, and I just keep doing that and I don't stop, eventually I will get to the top of that mountain. And at the top of the mountain is the success that you're aiming for. Whether that's the answer to it all or not, I mean, it's depends on you, but that's how, pretty basic way of thinking of just achieving goals, especially in a career like working in music as an engineer, producer, songwriter, whatnot, where it's so random and chaotic and no rules, and just it's like the Wild West all the time, where there isn't one certain path that you can walk that someone else walked that became successful. You can't just walk the exact same path as them and be successful. Sometimes, but I would say most of the time, everybody is creating their own path, and it's much more difficult because of that. Because yeah, it's just no clear cut answer of how you become successful, how you are able to do this long term and make it a thing that will sustain your life. Have it be something that takes care of you financially and just also gives you a certain lifestyle that's of a decent quality of life. If you have a family and whatnot, or even if you are just single, still, it's like you want to be successful at what you're doing, but it has to be worth it. Your success doesn't shouldn't if your success comes at the cost of you having to be a workaholic and never having time off and just constantly being in the studio or just constantly traveling and you're burnt out and you're tired and you have no personal life, no personal time, no social life. It's like, well, what are you doing it for? That's a little bit over, out of balance. But I mean, if you're young, you could do that for some time, grind yourself out, and you're young enough to be able to recover. But it's not like a thing you could do long term. But why did I say that? Anyways, um, that's what you get when you just talk freestyle with no notes. You just talk, and you're like you just keep it going and you keep it going, and then you're walking down the hallway, and then hallway, and you take a left, and you take a right, then you take a left, take a right. You go through one door, then you go through another door, and then after like 20, 30 minutes, you're like, wait, how did I get here? What room is this? Am I in the same building? Hmm. You know what I mean? So because this is one thing I've in the past year or two I've come to appreciate about how difficult it is working in this field that I work in, because it is character building. And man, it's one of those things where I feel like to really be successful you have to be tested and challenged very hard. Well, maybe not. Like, there's that kid on YouTube that's the highest paid YouTuber, and he's like 8. He's definitely not fucking working hard. Maybe his parents are. I don't know what they do. But that's a that's a very, very rare exception, and that has something to do with today's world of technology. And that's another thing too of what I'm talking about is technology comes along, and every few years the game changes because of technology. So that's another reason why you cannot walk someone else's path and expect to get the same results, because all of a sudden technology comes along and now the whole landscape is different. So the path that they walk doesn't even exist anymore. So if these are all paths that are laid out on some field and you're just trying to follow people's like footprints and paths that they stomped out in the grass, well, that grass grows back really quick. So unless you're right behind that person, that path disappears. And it's all about making a new path anyways. And let's see. So life lessons though. I've come to appreciate that how difficult it's been to keep doing what I'm doing, because it's definitely, I feel like I'm still pretty far away from feeling comfortable doing what I'm doing, which is a good thing. If you're really trying to achieve something, real success and real freedom, like I'm trying to do, where I do the work that I do, it takes care of me, it gives back to me where I can take care of my life and my family. But I also don't have a boss, and I'm free to do almost, to just live on my terms. It's like That's my goal in life, is to not only make my own path in my career, but make my own path in life. Just live a version of life that is something that I decided to live, not something that I was taught and told and kind of molded into living by family or society or, whatever, the public perceptions, because I don't like most of it. So I feel like a big part of really just being happy in life is just knowing that you made your life into what you wanted it to be based on what you feel deep down is what you want. So by having to think about that in order to keep doing my job and stay in it, it's just becomes uh just like job skills that turn into life skills. So that is something that I am very grateful for, that I've had the experiences that I've had. And it's a tough thing because I wouldn't tell anybody else to do what I've done. I wouldn't even suggest anybody to try to become an engineer. It's well, it's the thing. It's like, I mean, the type of people that would be successful doing this type of thing, they're gonna they're gonna become successful anyways. They're gonna walk that path anyways because it just takes a certain type of person. So whether they have somebody encouraging them and telling them and helping them or not, it's like they're gonna end up doing what they're gonna do anyways. Because that was like me. It's like I had support as far as having, like, people in my personal life just trying to help me do what I do, but it was definitely like not the thing that everybody probably would want me to do. Everybody wants other people to be doing well and to not struggle, but I think people are wrong about that a bit. It's like, yeah, you don't want people to like struggle too much, You don't want people to be fucked up and have to struggle through extreme things like, addiction and violence and poverty or nothing like that, and disease or whatever. But just enough to keep you on your toes, keep you sharp, keep you honest, keep you hardworking, because you have to be pushed, because that's the thing that it just activates you as a human. I feel like it activates you into becoming the person that you are meant to become. And it's something that only you can know and discover, because it's only you. It's just whatever is inside of you. So you're the only person that has the window to be able to look in and see what that is and discover it and bring it out. But that's not the way that the world works, and not the way that society works, and not the way the education system works, and the way that the standard way of parenting works, and government, and just, you know, the common perception of what life is and what you're supposed to do and what path you're supposed to walk. It's none of that really addresses the fact that we're all individuals that deep down inside are all completely different from each other. But when you decide to go out on your own and follow what you feel like is the path that you need to follow, you will probably struggle, because you most likely that means you're going against the current of what is, what you're supposed to be doing. So, but by going against that current and struggling, you find out a lot about yourself. You find out a lot about your weaknesses, your fears, your strengths. You find out, are you able to learn, to adapt, to grow, and to evolve or not? And the more you find out those things about yourself, the more your own vision for your path becomes even clearer, because you learn more and more about, is the thing that I want to do, is it really what I want to do? Because it's hard as fuck to achieve it. So I have to decide, is this actually what I want to do? Am I struggling for no good reason? Or is this struggle going to be worth it because I'm going to achieve the thing that I want? So it makes you just think to yourself and question and ponder it a bit more. And when it becomes clearer, then it becomes, more real to you that, okay, I am doing the right thing. So this hard work and struggle that I'm going through will be worth it. I have to just endure through it and keep going. And I have to learn from it. I can't, I got to learn how to overcome the struggle and learn from mistakes and learn how to not keep running into the same bad situation over and over again. Whether it's situational with people that you work with, like financial things, relationship things in your personal life, personal habits, things like that. Just knowing that, okay, I'm I need to always be learning and growing and getting better and not making the same mistake. That's the key to getting further along on the path and getting over all the hurdles and the things that create the struggle for you. So thinking back from when I started 10 years ago till now, I can say that, I mean, obviously, after 10 years of doing anything, you're going to learn a lot, you're going to change, you're going to grow. And I can say that I have, in a good amount, that I feel good about. I do feel like I still have a long way to go. I mean, I feel like there's no end. The path that I'm just choosing to live for my life, there's no end until life has an end. I feel like I'm walking my path. Whatever it is, I'm moving forward and I'm growing and evolving until the day that I'm not alive. So that is something where, yeah, there's never time to just get comfortable and just feel like the idea of retiring. I don't like that. Of, I mean, retire. Well, here's the thing. Also, I don't. Retiring is like, yeah, there is a certain point where you probably are gonna be old and you shouldn't be trying to grind and hustle. But as far as, I mean, that has to do more with career and financial and trying to make money and things like that. But once you're done with that, say you've made enough, hopefully, when you've made enough to where you no longer have to worry about that kind of stuff, then the idea of retiring and then you just chill for the last like 10, 20 years of your life, or 30, depending on how old you live, but you just chill and do like nothing, that to me sounds so stupid. First of all, I don't want to have to like work and hustle and grind until I'm like 60 something to be like, all right, I think I've done enough. I think I've accumulated enough of these man-made credit dollar currency thingies in my digital account that the bank says I have these many of to last me the rest of my days. Um, First of all, fuck that. And then, but yeah, I just feel like we are all kids until the day we die. There's no adults in this world. When you think about the world, the universe, the galaxy, existence, time, the vastness of all those things, and how small and short and minuscule and just tiny we are as humans, to think that you have a certain point where you just stop growing and stop learning and stop expanding because you've like made it to the top. I mean, there is no top. Like I feel like people need to be living for like 200, 300 years. And then when you get to like 200 years, then you could say you're an adult. You've had enough experience and enough growth to truly be an adult. Like as far as like what people would call an adult and what are the qualities of an adult. Someone that's responsible, somebody that is wise, that is aware, that has intelligence, that has empathy, that has compassion, that has strength, like all these positive qualities that people like should have. They take a really long time to develop all these things because they take experience to be able to accumulate all these qualities and master them. And it takes time and experience. And you live to like 80 to 100 years. It's like if you're really going for it, then yeah, I could say at the end of that life you've achieved all those things and you're an adult. But I think the average person is not. I think the common like paradigm is that human life and just human uh, consciousness is like a very small box that the average person lives in, that we're born into. We're raised in this small little box. We're taught that we are in this little box and that's all there is. But there's no box. There's nothing. There's no limit. We're just literally out in infinite space and time. So I'm not trying to spend my time thinking that I've reached the end of something. You know, there's the end. It's just like the end of my life will be like, well, it's about as far as I could go down this endless trail. I'm glad I got to go this far. I wish I could go a little bit further, but I got pretty far and I'm happy about that. But yeah, that's just it. Gonna be done. And these are, I don't know. I don't know if I'm just assuming that I'm a deep thinker or not, but this is what I think about, and I like to think deep, and I feel like naturally I'm that type of person, but also the type of work and type of career and lifestyle I've had has caused me to be even more deeper of a thinker because I live such an unorthodox type of life, and the experiences I have and the things that I have to think about and deal with is so specialized and so specific and have just constantly put me constantly in a state of struggle. Sometimes it's just a tiny bit of struggle. Sometimes it's a lot of struggle, but it's always struggle of some kind. Because nothing is for sure. Everything changes year to year. So I can never honestly say I know what's going to be happening. I can't say what's going to be happening like month to month, really. Like this year, 2018 is probably the most it's the biggest year so far of my career as far as what I've done and what I've experienced and all that, or worked on a good amount of work, released, good amount of albums, the quality work that I enjoy, got to travel for work and just meet lots of new people, got to produce something that I think is pretty significant. If you heard my previous episode on the song Yeah Yeah that me and my partner Karan produced for Jaden. So all those things are pretty big, but it's like I can't say that next year will be one way or another. I feel good, I feel positive that it will be better and it's going to be moving in the direction that I want. But as far as what's gonna happen, I have no idea. Like a few months ago, when I had to travel with, I traveled with Jaden on tour while he was on the KOD tour, and we were working on the album, the Sunset Tapes. I didn't know that was gonna happen until like 2 weeks before, or last 2 weeks before I had to leave and go out. I just got a message asking if I'd be available to travel on these certain dates, and then I look at it and it's like, oh, that's like next week. So, that came out of the blue. It happened right away, and it just boom, there you go. I'm on the road. Then I did that. I came back after a week. I didn't know if I would be going again. They told me maybe, but it wasn't for sure. So I just kind of had to wait. And then the next time was same thing. I just get a message. It's like a week before, and then, hey, can you go on these dates? Okay, sure. And then the final time I went was like, uh, I got asked the day of. I got a message in the morning asking if I could fly to Toronto that day. Like they wanted me. It was like I probably got the message like 8 or 9 in the morning. They wanted me to catch a flight at 2 p.m. to go to Toronto for the week. So, I have a family, so I can't just bounce. Like I gotta like make sure that arrangements are made so things are cool at home. So, uh, luckily I have a very supportive family. They help me out and understand that this is the way it is. So they help me do what we got to do to make it all work. So appreciate that, of course. But yeah, that's the thing I'm talking about. Like shit like that can just happen, and it's just when I hop on that plane and I'm just going to some new place I've never been to before, and I'm just in a new city. We're working. I'm just meeting new people. It's like it's so surreal. And then to just know that I had no idea I would be doing this just like a month or two before, or really like, yeah, a month or two, no, like less than that, a few weeks before, it's all makes it even more crazy. But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting, of course. Things happen like that. Pleasant surprises, not like fucked up surprises like, oh, you owe the government $50,000. Never had anything that bad, thankfully. I try to do my taxes properly. So, the point I wasn't trying to make a point actually. I was just talking. But yeah, because I've had all these years before of having shit just be up in the air and I don't know what's gonna happen, but I gotta be prepared for what's gonna happen, for what anything that could happen. That comes from having to work in a studio where I have to engineer and I have to get set up before the clients get there, and I don't know what we're gonna be doing. I don't know who's gonna show up. I just have to be prepared for anything so that when they show up and they say, let's do this, I'm on it and I can get to it quick, and they're not sitting around waiting for me to get shit set up, and they're annoyed and their they're losing their creative vibe. That's when you fuck up, when that kind of stuff happens. So for me, by being in those type of situations where constantly I just got to be prepared for anything, and it's on moving on the fly, and I got to just roll with it. That's makes it much easier to deal with when life does that to me. So engineering is an interesting line of work that creates interesting set of life skills, because I have to be so many things at once when I'm in a session. Say if it's particularly challenging. So it's like maybe the artist is just very eccentric and creative and just all over the place. They have a very specific way that they want to work. They ask for ridiculous kind of things. They ask things of you that don't really make sense, but you have to make sense of it and figure out how to translate that into what the song is going to sound like. Then maybe you're in a studio and it's just equipment and shit and something breaks and then you're like, "Oh, we're not getting the signal from the mic." Okay, what's wrong? Is it the mic? Or is it the cable? Or is it the mic pre? Or is it the console? Or is it the interface? Or is it the computer? Is it the software? Do I have something set up wrong in Pro Tools? Like any number of things could be going on, and you have to figure out what actually the problem is as fast as you can. Especially if there's like artists that's like in the booth and they're ready to go, they're ready to work. You got to figure that out real quick, and that's something that's a completely technical issue that you have to figure out. But then they get in the booth and they're recording and they're talking to you, and then now you have creative issues that you have to figure out. They want you to do something, they're throwing you an idea, and you have to use your creativity to be able to deliver to them what the thing is that they want. So it's a good exercise for both sides of the brain. And I think it's important to be very balanced in your brain, because there's two sides of you. It's the male and the female. You have this balance of two polar opposite parts of yourself and what you are able to do with it. So when you have it balanced and it's all pretty 50-50, I feel like it turns into where you have just one brain working together, not two separate sides that you're just bouncing back and forth and like a pendulum, you swinging from one side to the other. If you can just always be in both, I think you're just running at an optimal level. Because there's like intelligence, and there's like the emotional intelligence that people say, then there's like awareness, creativity, imagination, and all that. Like those are all different attributes and skills, I guess, of the mind to have. So the better you are at all of those things, the better you are off in this particular line of work. But I guess those are, like I said, I feel like they're pretty good life skills that you could use for doing anything. And I think there's a lot of other fields of work you could be doing that are a lot more just one side or the other. Like if you're an accountant, a scientist, an engineer, a doctor, like a lot of those kind of things, traditional things, they're just like left brain all the time. Like there's no creativity to be had. You just have to do work, and you have to do high level work. You have to think, problem solve, just that's all you do all the time. Numbers, 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 data, 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 facts, 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 negotiate, negotiate. So because these are all different aspects, I feel like there are part of the mind and our consciousness. I think you have to keep everything at a high level to just be a complete person. When you're lacking on one side, that's when you're lacking in life. It's like if you're lacking in emotional intelligence, you probably have a hard time with personal relationships, where it's like you have a hard time with regular intelligence, with like technical intelligence and numbers and math and things like that. Maybe you're not good with your money, or you just, you have a very disorganized life that creates a lot more just kind of chaos and madness for your life that you have to always overcome and deal with. Again, it's like you're causing your own problems. But yeah, if you can just be keeping a solid balance of all these different attributes of the mind, of the human mind, the better off you'll be, no matter what you do in life. Yeah. Okay, so damn, that was like the longest freestyle I've ever done. Where are we at? Where are we at? Okay. So, if you were to take away from anything from this, um, I would say if you don't know what you're trying to do in life exactly, or you kind of know, but maybe not specifically, like you want to be working in music. I mean, that might be why you would be someone interested in listening to this podcast, listening to me talk and ramble. It might not make sense to other people about what I'm talking about if you're not interested in music at all. But if you are interested in some type of career related to music and the music industry of being creative and all that good stuff, it is going to be a hard road, but it's a hard road that anybody can walk if they understand that this is just what it is, and to be smart about it and to just always keep their eyes open, stay on their toes, be ready to move, always be growing, always be learning, always stay just open, and know that even though things get really, really tough, if you know that you are just trying your best to move forward and overcome and advance and get to the next level, you just got to know to yourself that it's worth it. But you have to know that there's so many sides to it because it's life. There's so many sides to life. You can't say if you're just a really dope musician, like you're just the best, piano player in town. That is only going to get you so far. If that's all you rely on, is like all you do is just try to be a dope piano player and get paid to do, be a session musician or be a performing musician, go on tour with people. It's like, yeah, once you're there in the studio or on the stage, being the dope piano player is what you have to be. But for the like 99% of the time when you're not doing that and you're just living life and you're having to travel and you're having to make money and deal with that and get work, like that's all stuff that has nothing to do with playing piano. So you do also have to learn about just standard professional skills and how to have them, how to manage yourself, manage your time, manage your money, know your worth. Either you have a manager or if you don't, like just knowing how to negotiate. That's not easy. It's always a tricky thing. I don't think it's like a natural thing for a lot of people to just have a knack for negotiating and just being somewhat cutthroat in that way, because that's really what it comes down to. It sucks because a lot of times you're dealing with people that you're cool with, like you're friends with, and you're working with them, and that's like the big part of music is that a it's just a communal thing and people do together and people become friends and they start as friends and they work and then there's money involved and then you have to figure out, oh, okay, I want more of the money, but so do they want my money, they want more of my money, I want to give them less of my money, but also we're friends and we hang out. That shit is horrible. It's horrible. Like a lot of people I work with that I'm like really just like cool with. I'm cool with just like the idea that I'm friends with them. I really like that idea. But then there's this like glass wall in between us that is invisible because it's glass, but it's there and it has, it separates us. We're not fully 100% like friends and people just because there's a money and this business thing involved. That's the underlying part of it. At the end of the day, I'm trying to make money as much as I can because that's what we're doing here. And but that's what everyone else is trying to do. So no one's trying to part from their money more than they have to. And it's not good for you to devalue yourself either and accept less and compromise like all the time. Sometimes you got to compromise, but not to be a pushover and just always just accept whatever someone's willing to give you. You do have to understand that the only person that sets your value is you, basically. Because even if you did have like a manager and they're negotiating for you, you'd have to have some type of value in yourself to just know that you need to even have a manager, that you're worth having a manager. So, yeah. But yeah, those are things you got to understand. And also understanding if you did have a manager, you have to understand, have enough like business sense of what a manager client relationship is to like know to not hire a shitty manager and get taken advantage of. So, like, there's all those things. And to say you are doing music and in one shape or form or another, you become super successful and you blow up. And let's say you're like famous now. Like, that's the thing, that there's no class you can take on how to be rich and famous. You know, it doesn't work like that. You only learn by having it happen to you, and then you sink or you swim, because that shit is fucking weird. I'm not rich or famous, but I'm around enough rich and famous people to see how fucking weird it is. So when you're not prepared for it, it just doesn't make sense. You know, it might seem kind of cool and kind of just crazy and exciting at first, but then it's like when you have to transition to that life and that's not what you're used to and that's not what you actually want at the end of the day, that that's crazy too. So, um, that's something you got to watch out for. You got to be prepared to understand that, like, if you're aiming to achieve enough success that would make you rich and famous, you have to understand that at a certain point, and when it happens, you have to deal with that kind of lifestyle. And a lot of people don't deal with it very well, as you can see from any number of celebrities that have, problems in their life. Some people just they become that type of person and they just never actually learn how to deal with it. So their just life is just always in a mess. Um, and then, how like that has a huge effect on your personal life with friends and family, who's going to be around you. All of a sudden, of course, you that kind of shit happens. Everyone wants to be your friend. All your relatives that you hardly ever talk to, all of a sudden they all want to be like, your close relative now. They're like, oh yeah, we go way back. We've been together since we were little kids. We've always been cool. You know, calling you up out of the blue, probably calling you for money, saying, oh, I need some help. Would you think that shit's tough, because it's like people don't want to have to say no to their family if they're in need and if you got it. But then if everybody, all of a sudden you got a big family, everyone starts asking you that, then what are you gonna do? Like, are you that rich? Did you get that rich or not? It's like, who knows? So yeah, and like, say you get a bunch of money, and then you spend all that money, thinking that that same amount of money you just got is gonna show up again, like next month, in the same way. Or it's like, no, that money was the money that you're gonna have for maybe the next 5 years. So you should have spread that out across 5 years. Or I mean, even more than that, you should have saved and invested most of that. But then, people go crazy. They want to buy a Ferrari and buy a mansion and all this shit and party every night and have an entourage. And then boom, that shit is all gone. I've seen that so many times working in studios with songwriters, producers, artists that just they get that one first hit song. All of a sudden, they're showing up to the studio, a different person, different personality, bunch of new people, entourage, this and that. Then they don't have a second hit, and then all of that starts to go in reverse, and there's all of a sudden there's less and less people, and they're showing up less and less to the studio, And maybe that car that they had before, they don't have that car anymore. They had to give it back. And then all of a sudden, maybe they're not coming to the studio at all. And then you never hear from them again. But if they would have been smart and that first chunk of change that they got, they could have turned that into something that would have kept them floating for a very, very long time. But like I said, there's no school for how to be rich and famous. There's only the school of life. And it is always in session. So always pay attention. I think I've said enough. Like, what am I doing? Trying to like preach and give life lessons and shit. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing at all. That's the whole point of this. Like, I feel like I'll never know what I'm doing, which will always keep me wanting to learn more and grow and expand and get better. So that would be my advice to you if you're listening, but take it or leave it. It's up to you. But if you made it this far, I really appreciate you for listening. This is the Talk Like No One's Listening podcast. We hit episode 16. Proud of that. And you can subscribe. I'm on the iTunes podcast, Google Play, wherever. Basically, I'm on Spotify too. It's like you can find it pretty much wherever you find podcasts. And share it, tell your friends about it, subscribe, all that good stuff. I can do this more and more as it grows. If I know that people are really listening to it and enjoying it, which I think somebody out there is, regardless, I'll keep doing it anyways, because whatever. What's the big deal? Doesn't cost me anything. I mean, it costs me $15 a month to host it. That's really nothing. So, yeah, I'm on social media, kind of. There's an account for the podcast, which I never use, but you can check me out. James Chulrim. So JAMESCHULRIM. You can check me out, follow me. You can send me messages there if you like about this. And look forward to the next one, whatever it may be. So get out there and, oh, that sounds corny. Just, do you to the best of your abilities. And just don't give up. Ever. Peace.